and welcome. Today it's all about love, modern love. In fact, I'm speaking to Daniel Jones, the editor of the Modern Love New York Times column, and John Carney, who's the showrunner of the Modern Love series on Amazon Prime. Hello and welcome, John and Dan.
Hello.
Thank you.
Hi. Firstly, I want to start off with a question I have been asked and discussed with the directors of the Mumbai version too. Why is it modern love? Because one of the directors of Modern Love Mumbai, perhaps like rightly said that love has, no age, that love is timeless.
I guess that question is to me because I came up with the name of this column 18 years ago. We wanted the newspaper is about what's happening now. It's about what's happening in the world now, and in our column in relationships now. So we wanted a word that would capture either things that were happening now or a way that we love that has changed, whether through technology or social change or any of those things. What is the news now and what are the trends?
So, Daniel, would you say that love has changed through the ages, which is why it is called modern love? And having edited this column for over 18 years, do you find a significant change over the period of time?
Well, I think there's a consistency in that feeling to connect and to care for people that's baked into us, and to live your life with other people that you care about. And that feeling of falling in love with someone who's not in your family, and that is the same. I think that feeling is the same, and it's baked into who we are, and it is about surviving and thriving in the world. But there are ways that people love that didn't used to be acceptable and that are becoming socially acceptable, and there are ways to have children now that didn't used to be possible, and there are ways to connect emotionally with people who are far from you that didn't used to be possible, and it's possible to have a virtual relationship. So there are lots of changes in how we connect, but that basic desire doesn't change.
Well, yes, different ways and means, but that end goal is the same. John, when you were translating this series from paper or column to the screen, what was your foremost thought, and how did you want to preserve the sanctity of this column?
Well, that was the $1 million question, when this show came up, because I had read the column and enjoyed it immensely, never thinking that there would be anything more to it than just that. So for me, it was less about coming up with a new gimmick or a new way into the column that Dan has sort of looked after for so long, and more about just me finding my own personal connection with it. And I felt like this is a show that doesn't need to change that much. It's not like we're gonna, do anything crazy with the idea of the column. They're standalone pieces. So given that sort of ultimate decision, the big thing for me was just how to sort of make a TV show that I could stitch together stories and make them feel consistent and make them feel like there was some continuity in terms of delivering a season of TV, which is a thing now, that had a feeling, a flavor, a tone, a vibe that was continuous. And you could have your favorite episodes and all of that, but the show felt like it had something to say that wasn't just 8 love stories, but that there was some sort of invisible stitch between each episode that would kind of connect it all. And for me, it was just to try and find my own personal way into that and to find some truth in that was all I really needed to say yes to making this show and jumping on board what sort of Dan had already kind of put together.
Well, the episodes were immensely compelling and made for great rewatch as well. I have to ask, which is the story that people love the most from the series?
That's very hard. It's different people love different. There was definitely ones that trended higher, if I can use that word. There's definitely ones that you'd notice a lot of activity online. I think that the one with Anne Hathaway in the series was particularly, I think, Dan, you'd probably agree, was one that like people could kind of like talk about, over dinner or going out for, like, did you see that wacky show with Anne Hathaway dancing in Washington Square Park? It was something that had a visual flair to it that people could kind of get on board. But I think different people love different episodes. I have my own particular favorites. I'm not allowed to admit that for fear of picking off any other directors or writers or whatever. But I think everybody has his or her own particular favorites, and I think the idea more was to sort of try and create a whole show that you could, watch out of order and pick and choose which ones you wanted to see. And it was really good fun to make in that way.
Well, you rightly said that the stories are visually appealing. And Dan, did you come in there to suggest stories that would lend themselves to a seamless adaptation?
I'm not a filmmaker, and I suggested stories along the way, mostly based on what John and his team were interested in and different kinds of themes. And but I was very shy about pushing a story when I didn't really know how something would be adapted and how it would work. And I was very surprised by some of their choices that did turn out to work well. And one of my favorite episodes was about the gay couple who adopt the baby from the woman who's sort of traveling and homeless. And it was just it departed a lot from the original essay in ways that I just thought were so magical and moving. And what I really like about what John has done is he's honored this. These stories aren't about countries or they're about connections between just small groups of people, and that the moments, like in the hospital at the end of that episode, the moments with Anne Hathaway sitting across the table from her colleague at the end and finally admitting what she's been suffering through. It's just two people, and it's just two people in the United States, in New York, or it's just two people in Mumbai. But just those moments that are so powerful, I think anyone who takes on this project, that's what they're really honoring and exploring.
Well, I feel like that kernel of love is intact from the column to the series, that it's been carefully carried over. You mentioned Modern Love Mumbai. In India, we have 3 of them. In fact, we have Modern Love Mumbai, Modern Love Chennai, Modern Love Hyderabad, 3 big metros. Modern Love Mumbai is already out with some esteemed directors there. It's been talked about a lot. Have either of you had a chance to watch any of it or see any glimpses?
That's my binge week soon that we've planned out. We're going to watch them on our holidays and take them with us and sort of watch them back to back and really try and get into not just the essays but the culture and that whole world of that. It's weird. It's like watching I don't know about Dan. I would say he feels this more than even I do, but you feel like the show is like one of your children that's gone off to Mumbai and is now coming back to like tell you, do you know what I mean? It's like, it's a very exciting prospect. I'm sure Dan can talk more about that, but.
I've watched them all. I watched them all when they weren't finished, and then have seen them again since they came out. For me, it's been a really exciting experience because I didn't know how well some of these stories would translate. But again, it goes back to this idea. One of my favorite episodes from the Mumbai version is the first one about this woman who's left by her husband, and she's instead of being able to get on his scooter, she's on a bicycle to get to work. So this was based on an essay by a woman in Brooklyn who is left by her husband, and he used to give her a ride to work into Manhattan. And now she's left with a bike to get across the Brooklyn Bridge and is in horrible shape. And it's a feminist empowerment story of her building herself back, both physically and emotionally. And people don't just get left by their husbands in Brooklyn. It happens in every country in the world. And to see how that was informed by the Mumbai landscape and by class and the celebration of her empowerment, it made me cry, just like John episodes made me cry, and that one did too, for a culture that I've never been immersed in and I'm completely unfamiliar with. But I'm loving these interpretations. I think it's a fabulous project.
I'm happy to know that they worked for you. Shonali Bose's film is the first one. It's Raat Rani. It stars a very popular actor, Fatima Sana Sheikh. And it's been particularly noted for its intersectional feminism, how she explores the class divide virtually via that bridge that we have. That's the Sea Link in Mumbai, on which you can't take two-wheelers. So so she speaks a lot in those a few minutes that she has, that half an hour. And I'm happy to note that you say that you like the interpretations and you rightly tapped into all of them. I wondered, and in fact, I didn't realize this, are these stories all supposed to be urban?
Excuse me, are they supposed to be?
Actually, urban love stories set in the metropolis, in a metropolis?
I mean, I would say Dan has a different answer for that than I do. That question actually is in fact one of the very questions and answers that when I referred earlier on to sort of making this personal to me, it was also to try and find meaning in what the term modern love meant. And that was what made me really jump towards the show, was for me, for my own personal kind of reasons, the modern love was particular in its relation to the metropolis that we find around the whole world. And in fact, for me, it was defined that the types of love that featured in the column, and certainly that we're going to feature in the show that I was helping make, it almost felt like nobody in the show asked for the love stories that they were getting, right, Dan? There was like, this is what happens when you go to a big city. You don't choose who your neighbor is. You don't choose who you're sitting next to on the subway. It could be a Republican. You don't know that. And you get on with your life and you adapt and you change and you fall in love with your doorman in a weird way, or you fall in love with the guy that you end up having a kid with through a surrogate. The city happens to you in a way that when you live in a rural community or a smaller and smaller, like my parents lived in a very small community, you kind of knew who your sweetheart was. You kind of knew where you might get a job. You could control things. That was the park. When you move to the city, you make a commitment to something, don't you? You jump in, and it's like, whatever there's an aspect of kind of diving in that we do when we move to cities. And for me, that's what modern love really, really meant. It wasn't that it was modern in time. It was modern in the way that metropolises are pretty modern.
How they operate, absolutely. In fact, it was statistically shown that before technology and in smaller towns, people married those they lived closer to geographically, whereas in a metropolis or city, that doesn't happen, and especially over time. But that's quantitative, and that's what the data shows. But this column and this series is so qualitative in the sense each one is so different and so diverse. So does that diversity come naturally, or was there an effort to make it diverse?
Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
I think there's there's an effort at that. There's an effort at that in the column itself too. At this point, I guess we published over 18 years, some 900 stories, and you are really looking for what's new every time. What haven't we done? What kind of situation haven't we done? And I think when we're talking about urban versus rural as well, that cities are kind of pressure cookers, and change happens more readily in cities and with greater variety. And so that we certainly publish a lot of stories that don't take place in cities, but I think if you're really looking for what's new and what are people doing now, that comes from like what John was describing, of interacting with people who you don't know and being thrown into situations that are unfamiliar and scary or exciting, and making those kinds of connections and that feeling of sort of social change boiling up all around you.
Now the representation is even more, now that we've taken the stories to India and made them our own. John, what will season 3 be coming anytime soon? Have you started work on it?
I mean, I'm always open to the idea of making this show because it's got such a great back catalog. You know, it's almost like being in a covers band, you know, musically speaking. It's like, yeah, I'll play Led Zeppelin music. Fine, I'm happy to do that. There's such a huge, big cache of really interesting stories there. And we feel as creators of the TV version of the show, like we could pause for a year, we could go and make an episode in Paris, we could make a season in, you know, wherever we wanted to in any language. It didn't really matter. You know, we could, it wasn't a thing that has to go every 12 months and it, you know, there's a thriller aspect to it and it's like this or that, or the actors are getting tired or out of contract. We'll hire new actors, we'll go to new places, and we'll see how those sort of stories fit. You know, there was I don't see the show ending in any time soon, but I do feel like it's quite a fluid show in the way that it can sort of be made. I would love to go off on my iPhone and make 10 modern loves, you know, traveling around Europe or something. I don't think my wife would like that. It wouldn't be about me, but you know, I'm just saying.
That would be very good budget wise, though, John.
Very good. But you know, there's a ton of ways to make this show, and I think that's unique to this show because the essays are, you know, so well put together, and sort of Dan has done such a good job in sort of giving them a cohesive voice, and so yeah, I'm not sure where the third season is at, but ready to rock.
That's a fantastic note to end this on, a very appropriate one. I had a lovely time talking to the two of you, responsible for bringing so much love on paper and on screen. It was my absolute honor. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.